and welcome to All Things Career Services with TNT. I am Dr. Tracy Spots.
And I'm Tatiana Goss.
And we are so excited to have you here for episode 3. Today's topic, we're going to be going over networking advice and how to craft and create a resume. And why am I so excited? Because I have my dear friend Mackenzie Haynes here from Awesome Inc., and she is going to blow this podcast up for us today. So, Mackenzie, do you want to take it over?
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. I am really excited to be on this podcast. This is something that I have believed in for a really long time, of making a way to help this important information get out there for people in a way that they can consume it really easily. So I've been in the career services space for 14 years, which is a little painful to say out loud, but it's really exciting. And so with that and the work that I've been doing through working with people in all different levels of their career, whether they were high school students who were just trying to figure out what am I going to do with my life, to professionals who are transitioning their careers from, all right, I've been in this job for 30 years, my company is going under, I have to change direction, helping those individuals pivot, and then working in higher ed alongside Tracy, as well as a bunch of other really great professionals. I have been poured into and mentored and coached along these different areas. And so I am so excited to be here today to be able to help share that information that I've been given to help with you guys. I just mentioned that I have been poured into and mentored, and that can't happen without networking. So I was really excited about this topic specifically because I have been learning how to become a networker for the last handful of years. And I think I definitely have found a couple of things that are helpful that I'm looking forward to passing along to your students and your listeners.
Well, that's super exciting to hear. Yeah, Mackenzie and I go way back. And honestly, she has been mentoring me in this career services space. So I'm super excited for you all to hear what she has to say. So I'm going to now turn it over to my compadre, Tatiana, so she can ask you some well-informed questions.
Okay, so like they mentioned, we're going to be talking about networking. So can you share your networking journey with us and how did you get started?
Yeah, appreciate that. So I think where I got started in having to network was I ended up moving into a career space where I didn't know anybody. And part of that I needed to do was find some people who could be in my corner and who could be supportive of me and who I could ask questions for. At the very bottom part of networking, the very most basic piece foundationally that you need to know is that networking is curiosity. And so if you can walk into any space with a idea of curiosity and having your focus be outwardly of like, this is a really interesting space to go in. These are going to be interesting people to learn from and to ask questions of, instead of worrying about, oh my gosh, are they going to like me? Are they going to want me? Should I even be here? So one of the things that I really have transitioned my networking to is focusing on curiosity instead of focusing on myself. Because it's very easy for me to walk into a room and be like, oh my gosh, they look more professional than me. They're more put together than me. They know what they're doing with their life and I'm a hot mess. If I walk in with that space, it's going to be very hard to network with people versus if I walk into a space of, here's a bunch of really great professional people that have so much to offer. I wonder what I can learn tonight. Or I wonder if this person could be somebody who is connected to someone else I know. Going in with those questions of curiosity instead of those worries about self really helps a networking event or a networking situation go so much better. So that's what I think would be like the most foundational piece of the networking. And going on from that, whether you're going to be going to meet somebody, you're going to go to a networking event, going in with that piece of curiosity is very helpful. And going into whether you're going to be doing it digitally, like through LinkedIn, or you're going to be doing it in person at a young entrepreneur event or a young professionals event that we have a ton of in Lexington, walking in with that curiosity is going to be really helpful in helping you take that next step.
Perfect. So I know networking isn't always pretty. Could you share some challenges that you faced and how you overcame those?
Oh, yeah. Great question. So you're right. Networking can be a little messy. And for anybody who likes to have a formula on how to do something, like if you do step 1, then you do step 2, then you end up at step 3, You're not necessarily going to get that with networking, which might seem a little nerve-wracking at first if you're a very process person. But what you can do if you're a process person is you can go ahead and set up maybe a couple of questions that you're going to have ready. Again, remember, come in with curiosity. And so if you come in with those pieces of questions that you've got for the people that you might be networking with, and if networking is freaking you out, like, oh my gosh, this word is so scary and it's so professional and it's so not me, you're just meeting people. You're just showing up to space. So if we can maybe take a step back and get rid of the scary words and just say, I'm going to meet somebody. I'm going to go ask somebody a question today. Yes, my introverts might still be feeling a little uncomfortable, and I've got some coaching for you in that, but it's showing up with curiosity to a place in space and being ready to just ask a question or two. Now, the part that I think a lot of people are stressing about is like showing up to that networking event and they forget about all the prep work that they need to do and all of the next steps. So what I would like to remind people is networking only works if you keep the relationship going. So for example, if you go to an event that we're hosting, Five Across, we've got Five Across coming up, and it's a great way for individuals to come together over a meal and over an event that's full of high energy. You will have the chance to meet a couple people. And in that, the next step that you always need to be thinking about is, how do I continue the conversation past tonight? And so what I always like to do is I have the LinkedIn app on my phone. And when I'm talking to somebody, I will always pull the app up before I leave and say, hey, can we get connected on LinkedIn? And sometimes I don't remember their names. And so I will just hand them my phone so they can type their name into there so that I don't have to awkwardly say, like, oh man, we shook hands a minute ago and now I don't remember. I'll just hand them my phone and say, here, why don't you go on and type your name in, make sure that we pick the right one. And so then we can be connected. So that now gives me a new connection so that when that pops on LinkedIn the next day, I can send them a quick little message saying, hey, thank you so much for talking with me last night. It was great to discuss this thing. And then I can ask them a question next. Remember, networking and continuing that is all about asking questions. So the next day after I thank them for talking to me, I can ask a new question like, hey, what did you think about the winner from last night's event? Or, hey, you know what? You mentioned that you go to this meetup for developers, and I forgot the name of it. Can you remind me what that is? And so that way I'm starting to ask questions and get more information so that we can continue to discuss through LinkedIn. And then that way we can continue the conversation. Now, that part, that's a kind of a process thing. I go to an event, I talk to a person, I add them on LinkedIn, I send them a message the next day. So there's a process if you want a process. And then the next thing that I do after that is that I put reminders in an app so that I can be reminded to check back in with people. So in our lives right now, we are so busy. We are running all the time, always going from thing to thing to thing. And we have so many things that are weighing on us. My brain just cannot remember this person I met a month ago on its own. But if I have a reminder that reminds me every month or every other week to send something back to them, then I'm able to stay in contact with those people that I want to grow a relationship with. So I met this person at the event, message them the next day, then I put them into my app so that I can set myself a reminder in a month to reach back out again. Now, when I reach back out the next month, I'll usually reach out with some sort of related information. So it could be something from the event that we went to. It could be from a piece of advice they gave me, or I will look through and find a news article or a post on LinkedIn that is similar to some of the things that we talked about or some advice that they had given. And that's what I will use to reach out to them too. So I want you to be like, hey, what's up? What's going on? What have you been up to this last month? Because that's not a lot of substance. But I can say, hey, I was rolling through my news feed and I saw this post about this company that you and I talked about. I thought it was really interesting. I was wondering if you saw it yet. And I send them that article. Now I've got some substance to talk to this person about again, now a whole month after we met. And it took very little effort on my side to put an app in a phone and then to have a reminder and then send them a post. So that's a way that I can have that long-term growth in relationship. And eventually it might get to a point where I don't have to put the reminders in the app to reach out because this person and I are just having a regular conversation very often. And that would be great. But not all networking relationships are that way. I have a couple, like Tracy and I probably talk maybe like once a quarter or something like that, where we just have something that pops up that reminds us of something that I know that Tracy is really knowledgeable about. And so I'll reach out to Tracy about it, or Tracy might have a question for me about a connection that she saw that I have on LinkedIn that could be helpful for her. And because of this long-term relationship that Tracy and I have had, we're able to do that and very easily able to reach out and support each other as necessary.
Oh, perfect. Thank you for sharing your process. I love what you said about reaching out and connecting because that's all very important. But now that you said that, do you have an example of a success story that you have?
Ooh, good one. Good question. Okay. So I think a good example, and I think this is kind of timely. So we're in the middle of big blue nation here, right? Lots of Kentucky fans around. And so one of the things that I got to do in a previous role was find a way and invite Mitch Barnhart, who is the athletic director from UK, out to an event that I was hosting. And so one of the things that I know from my networking experience and coaching is that I need to research and be curious. And so for me, what I was able to do is I was able to reach out and with curiosity and with the research that I'd done. Mitch Barnhart is from a community that was very similar to the one I was supporting at the time, went to a school similar to the one I was supporting. And I knew this information about him, and I reached out with this information and just openness and curiosity of like, how can we work together? How can we provide benefit to students who are just like you one day? And it was really successful. He reached back out and we communicated back and forth a little bit and set up this opportunity for him to come out to an event. It was a really good opportunity for the students that I was supporting to be able to hear from a top tier athletic director as they were preparing for the next steps in their career. From that, a couple of the students were able to get some information about how they could go on and they could volunteer at the University of Kentucky and start their career in that direction. So that's one where I was doing that for work. One that I was doing it for my personal, and this is something that I've had to do more recently, is reach out to people that I don't have many connections with to be able to find the next step. And so for me, in my background in career development, it's really important for me to continue to learn because our world is not one that just stays the same. The rules change all the time and the best practices are updated quite often. And so for me, what I started doing is reaching out to the top names and influencers in career development to be able to get that information so I could improve my career. And so same thing, and this time I did it through LinkedIn. And so I would find the people who were the most influential on LinkedIn and in our space. And I just drafted some really simple messages. Now, out of like the 6 or 7 that I sent, I got like 2 responses, which could be like, oh man, I only got 2 responses. But actually, that's pretty great because I put myself out there and I provided information. And the people that got back to me were ones that are actually willing to engage in conversation. So it's okay when you're reaching out to people and you're not getting a response back. I started learning to not take it personally, and it has nothing against me. They don't know how wonderful of a person I am. Just like any of you all who are doing, any of you listeners, if you're reaching out to people and you're not getting responses, it doesn't mean that you have no value to give. It's 100% just, it's not going to be a right fit. So you have to keep going. So I only had a couple of people that connected with me from those reach outs, but through that, I was able to have some really good coaching meetings. I met a LinkedIn analyst who looked over my LinkedIn and gave me all sorts of wonderful tips on how to improve it. I got invited to go to some conferences. I got invited to be a keynote speaker at a conference. And I just kept keeping those communication lines open. So over the maybe like 2 or 3 years since I did that kind of main reach out, I've had some really great opportunities where I've gotten to go places and I've gotten to speak at different events, got to, do podcasts, which was really fun. So those are some examples. And that came from only a couple people responding to me when most of the people didn't. And that's okay.
Okay, so you mentioned using your phone to like remind yourself or downloading different apps. How do you approach networking in a digital age? And then what role does social media or can social media play in that?
Yeah. Oh, that's so important. And this is something that I'm continually telling the people that I'm working with is that LinkedIn was created to help make this easier and help provide us this opportunity. So one of the things that I feel is really important, especially for the populations that I work with, is that they need to have access. And I think access is a really good equalizer for all of us. And LinkedIn provides that. So for any listener, if you do not already have a LinkedIn, please go and create one. LinkedIn will actually walk you through the entire process. They have a digital guide that will say, here are the top things that you need to have on your LinkedIn. They'll also have suggestions along the way of, hey, you haven't put in your education yet. Put in your education. You haven't put in your experience yet. If you added this, it would increase your LinkedIn score. All of these different suggestions that'll be super helpful. And so I mentioned a second ago that I got a LinkedIn coach. And that was a job I did not know existed until I connected with this woman. And she was so helpful in looking over my LinkedIn where I thought it was pretty good. And she gave me all these different ways that I could change and edit and update it so that it could become better, so I could speak to my audience better, so it would be a better platform for me. And so I use LinkedIn a lot for networking. And it's really important to me that I only connect with people that I have met or that I think I will have a working relationship with. So if someone reaches out to me and they don't include a note in their reach out, I probably won't accept it. Or if it's somebody I haven't already met yet, because I want to make sure that anybody that I'm connected with can know that I could introduce them to someone else I'm connected with. So I don't connect with strangers, or I don't connect with people that I don't think are working in the same space as me, because that would be unfair to my other connections. So I want to make sure that if Tatiana, you and I are connected on LinkedIn and you're looking through our mutual connections and you see this really great person who could be really helpful for you in apprenticeships, I don't want you to reach out to me and say, hey, can you help me get connected to this person? And me say, oh, actually, I really don't know them. I was just really full of my pride and ego and I just accepted everybody. I want to be able to make sure that everyone that I'm connected to, I at least know somewhat or know something about them. Because I think that's important. Because again, networking is relationships and networking is curiosity. And so I don't want to have a bunch of people in my quote unquote network that I don't actually have a relationship with. So I use that. And then I use LinkedIn as my platform to stay connected to my network. And so I will share updates fairly regularly on what I'm doing. So that could be an event that I'm hosting, or it could be a new project that I'm working on, or it could be sharing a news story of something that is relevant to people that I know that I'm connected to. A lot of what I'm doing right now is sharing job openings for the job seekers that I work with. And so I'm really mindful of making sure that I'm posting fairly often. And I'm not posting CAD videos and I'm not posting things about politics, because this is a very specific professional area where you can make professional relationships and you can keep them going further. I might not have time to have a coffee chat with everybody that I'm connected to, but I can still provide value. And that's what I like to do on my LinkedIn.
Perfect. So you've mentioned a lot of different tips and tricks. What are your top 3 effective strategies for a college student when it comes to networking?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier that I have some tips for my introverts. I wrote a blog post and we'll share that hopefully in the notes that you can go and you can read that later. But the top 3 things that I have for college students is 1, get started, which I know is like, okay, start where? Here in Lexington, we have some amazing events. The TNT team here, I know, is hosting some great events where you can go and you can meet people that can help you in your professional journey. And so attending any of the events that the career services team has, I think would be your number 1 place to get started. If you are unsure about where you're going to find those right connections, just, I think, ask you guys first. And then outside of the BCTC team, Awesome Inc., we host regular events that are demo days and 5 across. And these are great opportunities for people to come together and celebrate entrepreneurship. It is scary to network. It is even more scary to network as an entrepreneur. So coming out to these events where you can hang out in a very chill environment and have some very easy intros to each other is something that I would recommend. So 1, get started, show up, and those are kind of connected to each other. Number 2, be prepared. So have 2 or 3 questions that you would ask somebody in a networking situation. So if you're going to go to a networking situation, have a couple questions. So number 1 could be, hey, what are you hoping to get out of tonight? You know, we've always had that question asked like, whoa, what do you do? Or what do you want to be when you grow up? Which are very like stressful to answer because sometimes we don't know. But you can say, hey, why did you come to this thing tonight? What are you hoping to get out of it? Then you get to hear a little bit of that. And maybe it's, well, TNT told me I had to. Okay, that's fine. That's a great answer to have because then that's funny and you can dive deeper into it. Or it could be, my friend is pitching tonight. And so I wanted to, see how they did. Then that's a really great conversation to have. So you can dive deeper. So have a couple questions prepared for walking into those environments. So that's my number 2. And then my number 3 thing is follow up. My number 1 thing of following up is doing LinkedIn. If you don't have that LinkedIn ready yet, that's fine. You still need to get there. If you don't have a LinkedIn, then have a card with your email on it. Even if it is like a simple piece of paper that you printed off that's got your name and your major and your email on it. Have that on there. Because what I've noticed, especially for my younger individuals who are going out and actually putting themselves out there for networking, a lot of times people will ask, hey, how can I follow up with you? You want to send me your resume so I can have a look at it? And so I guess a bonus tip, have your resume ready when you go to these networking events. You don't have to take it with you, but you need to have it ready to send to somebody.
So you definitely have a lot of knowledge, and it sounds like you've made a lot of connections. How do you maintain those relationships over time?
Yeah, I think the number 1 thing that I do for the people who are kind of like, well, if you think about your network in layers, so like your tightest ones are the ones that you have like very good, strong professional relationships with. You've got those core ones and you're just organically talking to them fairly often. So there's that level. And then the ones that are a little bit further out, maybe that you're not talking to a lot, those are the ones that I start putting into my app where I track the last time that we communicated. So then I can have a reminder of when to reach out again. And then when I go to things like on a regular basis, so there's a couple of different conferences that are hosted once a year, I always make sure that I post on LinkedIn that I'm going. And then I make sure that I connect with the people year after year. Like I make sure like, oh, so-and-so is going to be there again. Okay, good. I want to make sure that I like at least have 5 to 10 minutes to just pick their brain or to ask them what they've been doing or ask them what their favorite thing that they've done this year is. Because people love talking about themselves and bragging on themselves. And so if I can get other people to do that, I don't have to, but I get so much information.
Okay. Getting started was your first tip or your first strategy. So what advice do you have for someone who struggles with initiating conversations?
Yeah. If you are feeling that way. So that's kind of what I talked about is when you're walking into a room, if you're focused on yourself, it's going to make it really difficult. Like, oh my gosh, I'm nervous. Oh my gosh, I'm feeling all these things. I'm sure I have pit stains right now, right? All of those really stressful thoughts. Good news is you are not the only one in that room having those thoughts. And so if you can come into the space and maybe like get in, take a couple deep breaths, and then start looking around the room, find the other person in the room that looks equally as uncomfortable as you, and then just go kind of like stand by them. And then you can just ask that like one question because you've already had this prepared question. You don't have to think about it in the time. You don't have to have all this deep brain power. You can just go and stand by the person and say, so what brought you out tonight? And then you're able to do that. Or, so that's step, one thing that you can do is find the other person who's equally as uncomfortable being in the room and stand by them. Or you can find the loudest, most excited person in the room who you just have to make eye contact with once, and they're going to go, hey, and pull you into the fold like a Tracy. So it's either find the other person that looks as uncomfortable as you or find Tracy. And they will make sure that you have someone to talk to, and they might even pair you up with someone who feels equally as uncomfortable as you do.
Okay, so last couple questions about networking. So rejection is inevitable. So how do you deal with rejection or a lack of response when you are reaching out?
Yeah, that's so hard because when we're thinking about like, oh, why don't they want to respond to me? Like, it's hard for us not to go like back into like the dating world and be like, I'm being rejected and no one wants to take me to prom. Like you can go there really easily. But again, that's not the point of networking. The networking is not all about you. It's really about what you're able to do by asking questions and putting things out there. So another thing that I try and do is provide value. And a lot of people might think that they can't provide value because they're maybe new in their career or they don't have as much information, but all of us are able to provide some sort of value, even if it's sharing value that was created by somebody else, like an article that was written by somebody else. So I try as much as I can of not let those things really get to me. And I try and focus on just realizing that if they aren't able to connect with me in the space and they're not able to be responsive, then that's okay. I have like a couple billion other people on this planet who I can have those conversations with.
Okay, so last question. We did talk about tips and tricks. What are some mistakes that college students can avoid?
Oh, great question. So some of those things that college students can avoid doing is focusing on self too much in this space. And so with how to kind of pause in the networking space and to not make those mistakes, one would be to just make sure that when you're there, that you stay present. One of the things that generationally we see, and every college student has probably heard some older millennial or some Gen Xer say that you're on your phone too much. I am one of those people that pull my phone out so that I can network, but then I also make sure I put it back away really quickly. And so I would say avoid holding onto your phone at a networking event. Put it away and then pull it out to do those really quick LinkedIn connections and then put it back away again. But that is definitely a mistake that all of us who have become addicted to our phones have, that really hurts in the networking space. Another thing that I think hurts people in the networking space is treating LinkedIn like every other social media instead of keeping it professional. So I think between those two things to avoid, I think those are going to help you be really successful.
Well, thank you so much, Mackenzie, for answering all of our questions. How can listeners connect with you and continue the conversation or ask questions if they need to?
Oh, perfect. I love it. So like I said, this is all about asking questions, and that's what I want to be able to provide space for people to do. So reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can just search me. I think we're going to have some links in the episode. So there'll be a link to my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me there. Please add a note when you connect with me, even if it's just saying that I listened to TNT and that's why you're connecting with me. That's perfect. Another thing that you can do. So I work at Awesome Inc. Inc. spelled INC. We're in downtown Lexington. We have some really great events coming up to help provide people those connection opportunities. So come out to one of those events. And then lastly, I've written a couple of different blog posts about networking and resume writing, and a bunch of other career development areas. So you can check that out on our awesomeinc.org/blog. And we'll connect some of those specific links to really help you with these networking questions.
Well, we're actually out of time for today's episode, but I think I would love to have you come back and do the resume writing and how to craft a resume if you're down.
Sounds great.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And this has been Career Services Dynamite with TNT, and we'll see you next month.